Chapter 31 Zhang Yi's family is so rich that Bai Lianhua is crying. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Lin Caning's advice, Fang Yuqing realized she was right. More importantly, she was starving. The thought of the steaks, Australian lobster, snacks, and fruit Zhang Yi had sent pictures of had her mouth watering. All her reservations could wait for just one bite, so she pulled out her phone, found Zhang Yi's WeChat, and sent a voice message in her sweetest voice. Zhang Yi was at home, lounging on the couch, watching TV. While most TV stations worldwide had gone off-air, he'd downloaded tons of classic movies, shows, and variety programs, anything to kill the endless boredom. Ding dong! His phone chimed. Zhang Yi glanced at it and saw it was Fang Yuqing. A sly grin spread across his face. So, the Ice Queen's pride had finally cracked. He tapped the voice button and immediately heard Fang Yuqing's whiny voice. Ugh, Zhang Yi, you mean thing. You haven't talked to me in ages, you're so awful. I was just a little harsh with you the other day. Honestly, I regretted it right after. But I'm a girl, so it's up to you to make the first move. You're not even a little sympathetic. As a master manipulator, Fang Yuqing knew how to play the damsel in distress. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had Zhang Yi wrapped around her finger in his past life. Zhang Yi had to admit, her sugary voice still sent shivers down his spine. He gritted his teeth. If he didn't know how evil she was, he might actually fall for it. Zhang Yi replied with a text. I haven't been feeling well lately, probably sick, so I haven't been on WeChat much. Fang Yuqing quickly responded, Are you sick? Do you have a cold? You have to stay warm in this weather. Nah, I caught a heat stroke. Zhang Yi typed back. Fang Yuqing stared blankly at the message. Heat stroke. Was he kidding her? The temperature in their house was hovering around -50 or -60 degrees. They were practically living under a mountain of blankets, clinging to Li Caning just to stay warm. She was freezing so bad, she couldn't even sleep right, and he was saying he got heat stroke. Zhang Yi, stop joking. It's freezing. How could you get heat stroke? Zhang Yi sent back a huh emoji. Is it cold? Oh, I have a fireplace, so I don't really notice. The thing gets so hot it's almost unbearable. I probably got sick sleeping in front of it the other night. Zhang Yi followed up by snapping a picture of the roaring fireplace with his phone. He made sure to include his bare legs in the shot. Accidentally capturing the piles of snacks on his coffee table, along with leftover lamb chops and chicken drumsticks, then, he sent the photo to Fang Yuqing. Fang Yuqing saw the picture. The previous photos had just made her a little jealous, but this one made her see red. A fireplace. It was the ultimate source of heat. Even in the far north, a fireplace would keep you toasty warm, even if it was dozens of degrees below zero outside. The heating power was even better than a space heater. You could keep yourself warm sitting right next to the fire. Fang Yuqing had been shivering for the past 10 days, practically numb from the cold. Now, besides food, all she wanted was warmth. A few days ago, she and Lin Caning had burned a chair just to warm up. The heat only lasted for about 10 minutes, but the blaze had brought her to tears. But there was nothing much left to burn. After the chair was gone, all she had were memories of that heat. Who would have thought Zhang Yi had a fireplace in his house? Tianhai City was a southern city. You didn't even need a down jacket in winter. Who installed a fireplace in their house? Fang Yuqing didn't have time to ponder that. Her eyes were glued to the photo, and only one thought ran through her mind. She had to get to Zhang Yi's house. Seeing Zhang Yi's casual pose with bare legs and all that food on the table, he had suddenly become Fang Yuqing's only hope. Lin Caning, huddled next to her in the quilt, noticed the change in Fang Yuqing's face. She peeked over and gasped. Holy crap! This photo can't be real, right? How can anyone be living so well right now? It's heaven. Fang Yuqing snapped back to reality. Exactly, everyone is freezing and starving. How can Zhang Yi be living like that? Maybe this photo, like the others, has all been photoshopped. She decided to video call Zhang Yi. she would be able to tell if it was all a lie or not. Lin Canning also crowded in to stare at the screen. Zhang Yi smirked when he saw the incoming call. He couldn't wait to see Miss High-and-Mighty groveling at his feet. If he couldn't watch her fall into despair, how could he possibly avenge his tragic death? He tapped the answer button. As soon as the call connected, they could see each other. Zhang Yi had just finished working out and was sprawled lazily on the couch, shirtless. The room was brightly lit. He had fitness equipment behind him, and you could glimpse piles of food stacked up in the kitchen. He would randomly cook gourmet meals for himself, just for fun, so in the kitchen, he had haphazardly arranged a few boxes of scallops, fish maw, and abalone, as well as Qibao Yeating instant noodles, and high-end canned goods like caviar and truffles. To him, these things were just snacks to be enjoyed occasionally, but for the two women on the other end of the call, it was the ultimate feast. Compared to Zhang Yi's comfort, Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning looked exhausted. Wrapped in layers of quilts, they hadn't been able to use any makeup due to the cold, leaving them looking haggard. They were a far cry from their usual glamorous selves. When he saw Fang Yuqing, Zhang Yi's eyes showed a hint of disappointment. The goddess he had chased so relentlessly turned out to be a mere 6 out of 10 without makeup. He inwardly cursed himself for being so easily fooled. The two women barely noticed Zhang Yi's expression. Right now, they were completely captivated by the sights inside Zhang Yi's house. His bare chest meant the temperature in Zhang Yi's house was undoubtedly comfortable. The bright lights were a luxury they could only dream of, with power restricted to less than an hour a day. Official regulations prohibited the use of high-wattage appliances, or the power would be cut off completely, and the mountain of food in the kitchen made the two women's eyes gleam with envy, since they had been eating nothing but compressed rations for so long. Chapter 43. She is anxious. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Chen Zhenghao murdered the residents of 301, the entire building was on edge. Nobody dared speak up in what used to be a friendly group. Chen Zhenghao seemed to know it, and the other residents secretly formed a new group behind his back. But there's no stopping that kind of thing. He could only try to threaten and cajole the others. Things are tough right now. Everyone's just trying to survive. Nobody wants to kill anyone. If that kid from 301 hadn't come at me first, I wouldn't have accidentally killed him. I'm not a monster. I hope we can all live together peacefully and lend each other a hand when we're in a bind. Cooperate, and I guarantee everyone will be safe. Some people actually let their guard down after that speech. Some even started to think that maybe Chen Zhenghao was right. Maybe the guy from 301 had it coming. It was a classic case of Stockholm Syndrome. When facing death, even a little kindness from their captors could make them grateful. Zhang Yi remained a detached observer, watching it all without saying a word, but he was also a little more wary of Chen Zhenghao. His apartment was secure, and Chen Zhenghao and his goons were there. Junkie guns had no chance of breaking in, but in the apocalypse, a little extra caution never hurt anyone. If he crosses me, I'll find a way to take him out, Zhang Yi muttered. The brief calm was shattered the next day. Even though everyone was afraid to go outside because of Chen Zhenghao, they still needed to get water, so someone quietly opened their door, planning to sneak out and dig through the snow while nobody was watching. But Chen Zhenghao's goons caught them. They'd already eaten all the supplies they'd stolen the first day. Now, they were desperate and saw the building's residents as their prey. Anyone they caught would be robbed without hesitation. A frantic cry for help popped up in the new group chat. Zhang Yi opened the chat and immediately perked up. The person begging for help was none other than Lu Tian, who lived on the 7th floor. Chen Zhenghao lived right below her on the 6th. This morning, she'd been caught trying to sneak out and get water in the dark. She lived alone, making her an easy target. She was exactly the kind of target Chen Zhenghao and his crew were looking for. Plus, they'd been cooped up for almost 2 weeks, and Chen Zhenghao and his thugs were getting restless and wanted to find a woman to blow off some steam. Lu Tian wasn't exactly a beauty queen, but she was young and had a decent figure. In this situation, they weren't going to be picky, so the crew rushed to her door with wrenches and iron bars. Grinning like wolves, Lu Tian slammed the door shut. In desperation, she turned to her neighbors for help. Help! Someone, please help me. They're breaking down my door. They're going to kill me. Uncle Yu, please save me. Aren't you a veteran? You could take them. We can't trust these guys. They're animals. We have to stick together. If something happens to me, you're next. Lu Tian spammed the group chat with panicked voice messages. It was a far cry from how she acted yesterday when she was bossing around the group and ripping into the male business owners. Uncle Yu replied, "Girl, things are bad right now. I can't take on that many guys by myself." Uncle Yu was a good man, but he wasn't suicidal. Zhenghao had 5 or 6 men with guns. Even with his military training, he couldn't fight them off. If everyone had agreed yesterday to form a security team, they might have been able to scare them away. Lu Tiantian's heart sank when she read Uncle Yu's message. She wailed, "You can't do this. You can't protect a defenseless woman. What kind of men are you? If I die, I'll haunt you all as a ghost." At first, people felt sorry for her, but when they realized she was trying to guilt-trip them, they got angry. Plus, Lu Tian had insulted all the men in the building yesterday, and now they were getting even. "Oh, yeah, that's right, we're all useless. Miss Perfect, you're so strong, you don't need our help. Huh, Miss Perfect knows how to box. Beat those guys to a pulp. Weren't you so loud yesterday? I thought you were so tough, but now you're begging us idiots to save you. You're better off dead. The world would be a better place if you died." The group chat exploded with cruel laughter. Nobody felt sorry for Lu Tiantian's plight, they were actually enjoying her misfortune. If Lu Tiantian's apartment was robbed, it meant they were safe for a little while longer. Seeing the cold, mocking messages, Lu Tian despaired. She turned to the women for help, but the women's responses were just as unhelpful. "We're sisters, but there's nothing we can do. Hang in there, girl. I'm supporting you in spirit. You have to hold on, or they'll do things to you if they break in. Yeah, there are so many of them, they'll gang up on you." Some offered empty words of comfort, while others were trying to scare her. After all, misery loves company. The long isolation and the threat of death had twisted people's minds. More and more people joined the group chat, but the conversation had taken a dark turn. I say you should kill one of them, sister, and do the world a favor. Yeah, you're probably not going to make it anyway, so you might as well take someone with you. Lu Tian trembled with rage. Just as she was about to reply, the door burst open with a crash. Back in his apartment, Zhang Yi watched the surveillance feed. Lu Tian screamed and was dragged out by her legs by several goons. "It's freezing out there, but you got to get your exercise." Zhang Yi sighed. It made sense. In this situation, nobody knew when they were going to die. Before something dies, its first instinct is to pass on its genes. Zhang Yi took a bite of his chocolate bar and said to the surveillance screen, "At this temperature, every inch of exposed skin is a death sentence." Chapter 55. Neighbors want to knife Zhang Yi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a long pause, Zhou Keer finally agreed. Her conscience wouldn't let her be a lowlife, but she thought her neighbor's jealous attempt to rob Zhang Yi was even worse, so she decided to help Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi responded, "All right, let's see your intel first, then you get what you want. Your performance is everything." "Understood," Zhou Keer said. She was kind, but definitely not stupid. She wasn't about to help Zhang Yi for nothing. That ended their conversation. Zhang Yi glanced at the group chat, noticing 99 plus unread messages, all of them pushing him, even trying to guilt-trip him. "Zhang Yi, where the hell are you? Give us an answer. You gonna hand over your supplies or what?" Some people were already losing their patience. Zhang Yi smirked. It sounded like they were already planning a raid on his place. "Go eat dirt." Zhang Yi replied with a smile. Immediately, the group erupted in curses, every foul word imaginable. Zhang Yi didn't care. Bring it on. Having killed someone already, he felt no remorse, so he wouldn't hesitate to do it again. "Fine, Zhang Yi, you asked for this. Don't say we didn't give you a chance, you selfish piece of trash. You'll pay for this." The insults gradually died down. No doubt they'd formed a separate group, just like they did with Zhenghao, to plot their attack on Zhang Yi's home. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, a nervous excitement building. his body trembling slightly. Even knowing his home was an unbreakable fortress, the thought of facing an attack by hundreds of people was still nerve-wracking, but the thrill of it lit a fire in his veins. He'd been itching to teach these freeloading bastards a lesson. A white light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes, and soon his weapons were laid out in the living room: 5 high-quality steel crossbows, 3 professional-grade advanced compound bows, over 290 crossbow bolts, and 300 arrows. Plus 2 large iron box steel pillars, a machete, a 4-foot crowbar, a baseball bat, and a hunting knife. All the weapons were displayed on the table, perfect tools for taking lives. In addition to the melee weapons, there was also bear mace, electric batons, gasoline, a collection of chemical reagents, and dozens of Molotov cocktails he'd made from wine bottles, rags, and gasoline. Zhang Yi's eyes turned cold. Bring on as many as you want. Just as Zhang Yi predicted, when the neighbors realized he wasn't handing over his supplies, they lost it. Sun Jichao started a new group chat, adding all the living residents except Zhang Yi. They even invited Chen Zhenghao. Everyone felt a chill down their spine when they saw Chen Zhenghao, but Chen Zhenghao took the lead, saying, "All right everyone, our first priority is Zhang Yi. He's got more supplies than all of us combined. If we take him down, we'll get a huge haul. So don't worry, I'm not targeting anyone else right now. But I want half the supplies from this operation." Chen Zhenghao had learned firsthand about Zhang Yi's defenses and crossbows. He wasn't about to attack alone, so he planned to use the other residents as cannon fodder. He figured 100+ people could easily overwhelm Zhang Yi's home. How many weapons could Zhang Yi possibly have? How many people could he shoot? Chen Zhenghao and his crew only numbered 6 out of the 100+ residents, yet they demanded half the supplies, but nobody thought it was unfair. Instead, they saw Chen Zhenghao as a good guy. He had a gun and was still willing to share half with everyone. What a stand-up guy. Sun Jichao added, "Right, everyone, let's put aside our differences for now. Our first goal is to break into Zhang Yi's place and take back the collective resources." That with those 2 leading the charge, the others naturally followed suit. Seeing the life Zhang Yi was living had turned them green with envy, and they wanted to kill him and take it for themselves. Knives out, follow me. Let's kill Zhang Yi and grab the supplies. Let's get that selfish jerk. That the crowd roared menacingly. Only a few remained silent, like Uncle Yu and Zhou Keer. Others, even those who'd been friendly with or helped by Zhang Yi, had forgotten everything. Nothing mattered more than survival. They were ready to throw away their morals to survive. Back at home, Zhang Yi was wiping down his rifle. He was familiar with it, having spent plenty of time at shooting ranges, and he had ramped up his training in the month leading up to the apocalypse. Hitting a target at close range wouldn't be an issue. Just then, Zhou Keer sent a message. "They're heading to your place." Zhang Yi simply replied, "Got it." Zhou Keer frowned after reading Zhang Yi's calm reply. She pulled her blankets tighter and tucked her bare feet further under them. "Everyone's gone. They saw your video and lost their minds. Aren't you gonna do something?" Zhou Keer thought handing over some supplies to appease everyone was the smartest move. No matter how strong one person was, there was no way they could take on so many. 100 people could easily tear apart a house. Zhang Yi smiled, offering no explanation. He only said, "Remember, stay away this time. I'm only telling you once. Then, just sit back and watch the show." Zhou Keer frowned, her eyes filled with curiosity. She couldn't figure out where Zhang Yi got the confidence to take on the entire building by himself. This was no joke. The crazed mob would kill him the second they broke in. Is he crazy? Zhou Keer muttered to herself, but it was Zhang Yi's choice, and she couldn't do anything about it. Still, she took Zhang Yi's advice and didn't join the mob heading for his place. She had a moral compass and wasn't about to benefit from anyone's blood, Zhang Yi's or anyone else's. Chapter 56 Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi sat tight in his apartment, bracing himself for the arrival of his lunatic neighbors. His face was a mask of grim determination, a small arsenal of weapons laid out before him. Just then, a message popped up on his screen from the building's doorman. "Good ol' Uncle Yu. Zhang Yi, get out of there. They're all coming for you, armed to the teeth." A flicker of warmth went through Zhang Yi. Good people were a rare find these days, he smiled, typing back, don't sweat it, Uncle Yu. I got this. Uncle Yu hesitated, as if understanding there was no escape. This was it, he sent another message, I hope you make it, Zhang Yi. Sorry, but I don't think I can help this time. Uncle Yu felt a pang of shame. He'd actually taken Zhang Yi's advice. When Zhang Yi had told him to stock up, he'd gone out and bought a bunch of ramen, canned ham, the works, living pretty high on the hog these days, relatively speaking. But seeing Zhang Yi about to be swarmed by what looked like a small army, he felt helpless. Zhang Yi typed calmly, just you staying out of it shows you got a good heart. It's all good. Don't worry about me. Uncle Yu had made the right call. If he tried to help Zhang Yi now, he'd likely get torn apart by the mob of angry residents. After a brief exchange with Uncle Yu, Zhang Yi kept it short, avoiding details about his family. You couldn't trust anyone completely, no matter who they were. A few minutes later, Zhang Yi felt a slight vibration under his feet. A low rumble echoed through the building. Here they come, Zhang Yi murmured. He knew it was the sound of hundreds of people charging up the stairs. 24th floor, baby. With the elevator down, these stair-climbing maniacs were going to be winded. Of course, it wasn't just the downstairs crowd he had to worry about. On his security monitor, which gave him a view of the entire building, Zhang Yi spotted his next-door neighbor from apartment 2402 creeping out with a kitchen knife and a wrench. A young couple. The woman huddled behind the man, brandishing the knife like she knew how to use it. They were both staring at Zhang Yi's door with hungry, envious eyes. No doubt, they were green with envy after realizing their neighbor had been living like a king for the past couple of weeks. A throng of people filled the corridor outside Zhang Yi's apartment. Several even held umbrellas over their heads, anticipating Zhang Yi might try to douse them with cold water. Before long, someone lost their cool and started pounding on the door. Bang! 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 Zhang Yi, open up. Last chance to do this the easy way. Don't make us break it down. You'll regret it. Zhang Yi scanned the monitor feed. Sun Jichao and Chen Zhenghao weren't in the crowd. The fact that these people were resorting to brute force confirmed one thing: Sun Jichao, Chen Zhenghao, and their cronies hadn't told them the full story about the booby traps waiting inside. Their plan was to use the other neighbors as cannon fodder, to soak up Zhang Yi's crossbow bolts and high-voltage shocks. Fine by Zhang Yi. He had plenty of juice to spare. He flipped the switch, flooding the doorknob with high-voltage electricity. The guy who'd been leading the charge on the door let out a strangled cry as the current slammed into him. Worse, with the corridor packed shoulder to shoulder, the electricity surged through the crowd like a shockwave. High voltage. Get back. People recoiled like they'd been bitten. If they weren't wearing layers of winter clothes, they wouldn't have stood a chance. Everyone was convulsing, their muscles spasming. The door banger and the 7 or 8 people closest to him were hit the hardest. Unable to break free, they were fried where they stood. The others stared in horror. No one dared to help. After 10 agonizing seconds, Zhang Yi cut the power. A plume of greasy smoke rose from the 9 bodies, filling the air with the stench of burnt hair and cooked meat. Thump! The 9 people collapsed in a heap, their skin charred black. Whether they were technically alive or dead, everyone knew they were as good as gone in this situation. The crowd stared, wide-eyed and terrified. They hadn't expected so many to die at once. Right in front of them, the electrocuted faces were frozen in grotesque expressions, eyes wide with terror. Several women in the crowd couldn't take it anymore. They screamed, doubled over, and began to vomit. Unfortunately, their stomachs were empty. They just dry-heaved, spitting up bile. Some, panicked, tried to flee, but they found the stairs blocked by Chen Zhenghao and his goons. Where do you think you're going? Get back here. Chen Zhenghao brandished a pistol, his face a mask of false concern. The stairwell was the only escape route, and Chen Zhenghao had it locked down to force everyone to fight Zhang Yi. The more who died, the better. It would give Chen Zhenghao an excuse to swoop in and seize their supplies. Sun Jichao and a few others stood nearby, their faces gaunt and sickly. They looked at the 9 corpses with cold indifference. They clearly shared Chen Zhenghao's plan. Seeing the fear in the crowd, Sun Jichao shouted, "That monster Zhang Yi. He just murdered our neighbors. Brothers and sisters, we have to avenge them." We have to kill Zhang Yi. Don't be afraid. Just use wood to smash the door, and don't touch the metal. He's running on fumes. He's desperate. Once we break through that door, there's warmth, comfort and food waiting for us. Sun Jichao's words stirred the crowd. They'd been cold and hungry for weeks. For a warm meal and a safe place to sleep, they were ready to risk everything. Someone found a piece of wood, probably ripped off a closet door or bed frame. Let's do it. Open this door and kill that son of a bitch Zhang Yi. They raised the wood, aimed at Zhang Yi's door, and started swinging like madmen. Bang! 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 The force of the blows made the water glasses on Zhang Yi's coffee table tremble. Zhang Yi decided he needed a little mood music. He pulled out a massive Bose speaker from somewhere else, synced it to his phone, and blasted his favorite tune, Making Love while the mob hammered away at his door. A classic love song filled the air, enraging them even further. Zhang Yi, you're so dead. I'm going to kill you. You're going to pay for my brother's death. They redoubled their efforts, but after dozens of blows, they realized with dismay that the door hadn't even budged. Over a dozen grown men, swinging with all their might, and all they'd managed to do was leave a few white scuff marks and nearly invisible dents in the heavy black iron. The crowd was demoralized. What kind of door is this? Why is it so strong? How long is it going to take to break this thing down? Everyone was panting, exhausted. They were working in sub-zero temperatures, weakened by hunger. At this rate, they'd all collapse before they made any real progress. Just then, a man stepped forward, examined the door, and exclaimed, "Wait, this is a bank vault door." He'd worked at a bank for years. He recognized the design instantly. The crowd deflated. "You mean it's impossible to break?" The former banker shook his head grimly. "You could use a bomb on this door and you still wouldn't be able to open it. Without the key, the only people who could get through this are the world's top safecrackers." At that moment, Zhang Yi, crossbow in hand, took his position at the peephole. Chapter 57 Heavy Casualties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Looking at the people still outside, arguing about what to do next, Zhang Yi didn't even bother aiming. They were just neighbors, not close friends. Killing them was no big deal, and if he missed, so what? They'd probably be infected and die in a few days anyway. He sped up his shooting since it was a free-for-all. Quickly reloading the crossbow with one hand, he fired. Thwack! A sharp sound ripped through the air, followed by a scream. A man clutched his neck, eyes wide with terror, as he slowly collapsed. Everyone stared in horror at the rusty crossbow bolt sticking out of his neck. "He's got a weapon. Watch out!" People screamed and scrambled to get away, but the hallway was cramped, hundreds of people packed together, making it impossible to move. Panicked, people tripped over each other. Zhang Yi didn't care. He just kept reloading and shooting. The combination of a professional hand crossbow and tetanus-laced bolts meant almost certain death. Thwack, 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 each piercing sound was like a death knell, jangling everyone's nerves. Screams echoed as the wounded bled out on the floor. Terror drove the crowd to squeeze into the stairwell, trampling those who fell. Chaos erupted. Chen Zhenghao stood guard at the stairs, gun in hand, preventing anyone from escaping. "What are you scared of? He's just one guy. Get him!" Chen Zhenghao's cold stare and the gun's dark barrel dissuaded any escape attempts. He intended to use them as cannon fodder, testing Zhang Yi's defenses. Escape was not an option. To survive, Sun Jichao and the others had wisely stayed back, avoiding the arrows. Zhang Yi fired dozens of bolts, rarely missing in the packed hallway. Dozens of people were sure to die, but desperation fueled ingenuity. Someone yelled, "He's shooting through a hole in the door. Block it." People grabbed mops and brooms, jamming them into the hole. Others tried to throw things into Zhang Yi's room. Zhang Yi calmly closed and locked the iron door behind the hole. It could only be opened from the inside, and was indestructible from the outside. He had just eliminated dozens of potential threats in one fell swoop. Seeing the arrows had stopped, the neighbors recovered slightly from their panic. The floor was a bloody mess, with many wounded. 3 had taken bolts to the neck and head and died instantly. The sight of the rusty tetanus bolts sent a chill through everyone. They knew anyone hit would have little chance of survival. Some, having lost loved ones, cursed Zhang Yi through their tears. "Zhang Yi, you damn thief! You're a low-down coward! Come out here and face me, you gutless wonder! You murderous bastard! I'm gonna get you! Zhang Yi! I'll kill you!" The only response was the upbeat music blaring from inside the apartment. Only after loving can you understand how deep love goes. Only after losing do you understand what to cherish. The contrast between the shouts and curses outside and the singing inside felt like deliberate taunting, and it was. Zhang Yi's arm was getting tired after firing so many shots. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a Coke from the fridge, and took a long swig. Ah! That hits the spot. He watched the monitors, keeping an eye on the mob outside. The neighbors, seeing that the door was impenetrable, grew desperate. "What do we do?" Sun Jichao limped forward, holding his injured leg. "Don't worry, everyone. I've got an idea." He pointed at Zhang Yi's wall. "The door's alloy, we can't break that. But the wall? It's just brick and cement. I don't believe we can't bust through that." A spark of hope lit up in everyone's eyes. "Yeah. Why didn't we think of that? If we can't get through the door, we'll break down the wall. With all of us, it won't take long to smash it down." "Huh, Zhang Yi, you sneaky bastard. You never saw this coming." Inside, Zhang Yi saw the neighbors cheering and raising their fists in the air. He raised an eyebrow. The music was too loud to hear what they were saying. But Zhang Yi wasn't worried. He'd just wait and see. No matter what tricks they tried, he had them outnumbered. It had taken a month of hard work to build his fortress. They weren't going to break through it easily. The crowd gathered tools. They lined up in front of the wall, wielding hammers and axes. Boom! A large man swung with all his might, hitting the wall hard. Cracks appeared, and chunks of gray plaster fell away. The crowd cheered, sensing a breakthrough. They swung harder, but on the man's second swing, the hammer rang against something hard. Clang! The man screamed, dropping the hammer and staggering back. His hands were split and bleeding, quickly freezing in the cold air. "What's going on?" Puzzled, they wondered what kind of wall could withstand a sledgehammer. Someone brushed away the dust, revealing what was behind the plaster. His jaw dropped. The wall's made of steel." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Sure enough, beneath the plaster was a thick, black metal. It was the same material as the door. One man cried out to the sky, "Why? Who builds a house with steel walls? I don't believe the whole house is made of iron." Some, unable to accept it, started hammering at other spots. Several people worked together, hoping to find a weak spot, but everywhere they hit, they found solid, thick steel. In his living room, Zhang Yi smirked. "You guys think you figured something out? I thought of this a long time ago. Sorry, but the walls are made of 8-inch fine steel. Cannonballs can't break through. You think your hammers and axes can?" Zhang Yi's greatest strength was his fear of death, so he had addressed every possible problem. When he had inspected the finished product, he had checked every inch, hitting it with a hammer until he was satisfied. The memory of being broken into and eaten in his previous life was too strong to take any chances. The banging continued outside. Zhang Yi turned on the noise-canceling system. It was designed to prevent anyone from attacking using sound. After about 20 minutes, the noise stopped completely. The occupants of the building stared blankly at the metal wall, feeling a coldness that went deeper than the snow outside. The wall represented a cruel barrier, cutting off their hope of obtaining supplies. How could this happen? Why would anyone build a house like this? A woman covered her face and sobbed. Zhang Yi's next-door neighbors sadly said, "We knew they were renovating, but we had no idea. Not many normal people would build a house like this." Sun Jichao, Zhou Peng, and Gu Jiaoyang's eyes were bloodshot. If they couldn't break into Zhang Yi's apartment today, they were doomed. Sun Jichao bit his lip so hard it drew blood. Zhang Yi knew this snowstorm was coming. Everything he's done was to protect himself from us. Sun Jichao yelled, pointing at Zhang Yi's apartment. The neighbors glanced at him, then turned back to cursing Zhang Yi. That despicable Zhang Yi only cares about himself and doesn't give a damn about us. If we all die, what's the point of him living alone? If he's the only one left, won't he be lonely? One day, you'll regret not helping us. You'll be eaten up by guilt. How will you sleep at night? Don't you feel any shame? Unable to do anything about Zhang Yi, some began to find comfort in the idea that sooner or later, God would punish him if they died because of him. He'd be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. They had no idea how happy Zhang Yi was in his apartment. He couldn't care less about these strangers. Zhenghao had been supervising from the rear, gun in hand. The all-metal wall was a problem. Now, he only cared about getting into Zhang Yi's apartment. What's the rush? This is just the beginning. Zhenghao said coldly. Even if the walls are iron, what about the ceiling? The floor? He can't have turned the whole apartment into a tin can. Zhang Yi watched Zhenghao through the surveillance camera and nodded approvingly. That guy's pretty smart. He sighed, shaking his head. Too bad for him, I'm not an idiot. Hearing Zhenghao's words, the neighbors ran upstairs and downstairs to Zhang Yi's apartment. They hammered, chopped, chiseled, and bashed. They used every tool at their disposal. Their hope of survival was only 8 inches away, and their goal was to break through those 8 inches. But they soon fell into even deeper despair. They discovered that Zhang Yi's apartment really was just an iron box. Up, down, left, and right, every surface was covered by thick iron plates. In this power outage, without electric saws or drills, it would take them a year of constant digging just to have a chance of breaking through. Chapter 58 Despair. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhenghao and the others spent the entire morning tearing down the wall around Zhang Yi's place, but after ripping apart the walls, floors, and ceilings, they discovered a thick layer of steel plating, a 20 centimeters thick steel plate. That was their worst nightmare. They had zero chance of breaking through with just their bare hands. Freezing temperatures, combined with not enough energy to replenish their strength, was only going to kill them faster. A lot of them just collapsed, completely spent. Their stomachs growled loud enough to hear. They clutched their empty bellies, on the verge of starvation, but there wasn't much food left. Some guys glanced at their neighbors, catching glimpses of pale skin through the gaps in their clothes, and then the thought hit them, wasn't that just meat? The terrifying idea sent shivers down their spines. They tried to push it away, banish it from their minds, but once the thought was there, it became an option in a desperate situation. They knew, deep down, that cannibalism was a real possibility. Is there really nothing we can do? Sun Jichao looked like he was in agony. He was sure his arm was infected and starting to rot. No antibiotics, not even basic anti-inflammatories. He couldn't even clean the wound properly, plus, there was rust ground into it. He was as good as dead. Damn you, Zhang Yi. How could you be so cruel? Why should you get to live comfortably while we're all suffering? What's wrong with sacrificing yourself? What's so wrong with that? Sun Jichao roared at the sky, his despair twisting his mind. Just then, Zhang Yi's neighbor stepped forward. Maybe try the balcony. When they remodeled, they replaced the balcony wall with a huge glass window. Maybe you can break through there. The other residents couldn't see the back of Zhang Yi's apartment, but his neighbor could. In building 25, some apartments had balconies, and Zhang Yi's 24th floor unit happened to have a small one. He used to grow flowers and dry laundry out there. Hearing this, the group of people on the edge of giving up perked up. A window? Yes. He's gotta have an exit. He can't have sealed everything. If there's a window, we can get in. They stormed into Zhang Yi's neighbor's apartment. There was only about a 15-centimeter gap between the balconies, with a fence separating them, but that wasn't going to stop them. The balcony was a different story from the hallway. The hallways were blocked up and relatively warm. Outside, the north wind howled, and snow swirled. They'd freeze to death in hours. Chen, Zhenghao and the others didn't care. If they could get into Zhang Yi's apartment, they could have everything. Screaming, they jumped onto Zhang Yi's balcony like maniacs. Zhang Yi definitely noticed. They locked eyes for a split second, then the neighbors swung their tools and smashed them against the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Zhang Yi dragged his white recliner to the window, lay down slowly, and poured himself a cup of steaming coffee. The small balcony was soon packed with more than a dozen people. Their faces were pale, and they looked like living corpses. Add in their crazed expressions, and they didn't look human at all. Zhang Yi thought that if there were zombies, they'd probably look like this. Bang! 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 Clang! That the thuds echoed against the glass. Braving the wind and snow, these madmen were working their hardest to smash the glass. They didn't even flinch when they hit their hands by accident, letting the blood flow and freeze. When they were just smashing the wall, the feeling of longing hadn't been as strong. Now, with just a layer of glass separating them, they could see exactly how luxurious Zhang Yi's life was. The fireplace blazed, and Zhang Yi was lounging in just a t-shirt and pants. Like some kind of king, he held a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. Judging by the foamed milk, it was probably a cappuccino. Weapons were scattered on the coffee table, but that wasn't the big deal. The real kicker was the pile of half-eaten snacks on the floor: potato chips, burgers, cola, pizza, roast chicken, roast duck, even fried noodles. Those were the things that drove the neighbors on the balcony absolutely insane. After only being away from them for half a month, they acted like they'd found their long-lost dad. Roar! Ha! They were so excited they couldn't even talk, howling to express their pure joy. Then they went back to smashing the window with everything they had. Zhang Yi held his coffee and enjoyed the show. He thought, who says glass is weaker than metal? Building this wall had cost a fortune. For the sake of his lifestyle, Zhang Yi had turned down Zhanglong Security Company's suggestion to use metal. Instead, he'd splurged on custom-made bulletproof glass for the entire wall. He remembered Wu Huiren, the manager of Zhanglong Security Company, saying, "With a wall this thick, you're not just stopping bullets, you're stopping cannonballs." This was the same bulletproof glass used on Western heads of states' vehicles. The kind that could stop a sniper rifle, but their glass was less than half as thick as Zhang Yi's. After a while, they started to realize something was wrong. They thought it was just plexiglass that would shatter after a few hits, but after a dozen people had been hammering away for ages, why wasn't there even a crack? What kind of glass is this? Is it bulletproof glass? What? Bulletproof glass. The word croaked from the throat of a man with glasses, and it was full of despair, like it came from the depths of hell. It can stop artillery shells, but it can't stop your handiwork. No, I don't believe it. A young guy screamed at the sky. I control my own destiny. I refuse to believe I can't break this. If I break it, the fireplace, the food, the drinks, they're all mine. I have to break it. Between the freezing temperatures and the hope and despair, their brains had frozen. They threw away all reason and went berserk. Zhang Yi applauded them, showing his thanks. He was starting to get hungry himself, so he pulled out some food from his storage space, like braised pork knuckle, shredded banana, and some snacks, including pure cocoa butter chocolate. Chapter 59, Hit It Hard, Did You Not Eat? You are listening at novelfull.audio. All that separated them was a window, and outside, people with twisted faces were hammering away at the glass in the frigid wind and snow. Inside, Zhang Yi was chilling on a recliner, pigging out. The contrast was enough to drive the neighbors wild with envy. They screamed curses, eyes bloodshot. Zhang Yi, just you wait, I'm gonna kill you. Once I break this glass, you're toast, you damn selfish bastard. Your smug act won't last long. Today's the day you die. All that food and hot coffee, it's all gonna be mine, mine. Hearing this, Zhang Yi raised his coffee in a mock toast. Keep it coming, losers. Pretty soon, the gang outside were flagging. After all, it was the 24th floor, and the wind was howling. Add to that the blizzard, and their body temperature was dropping fast. They had to rotate every 10 minutes, but after half an hour, the glass barely had a scratch on it. despair started to set in. Still, seeing Zhang Yi's cozy setup through that clear pane, their jealousy wouldn't let them quit. Another half hour, and they were still at it. Zhang Yi noticed a few young thugs in the crowd that worked for Chen Zhenghao. Obviously, Chen Zhenghao wasn't going to just sit this one out. Zhang Yi figured it was showtime. He got up from the recliner, strolled over to the coffee table, and grabbed a bottle. The glass outside was coated in frost. At first, the neighbors couldn't make out what Zhang Yi was holding and assumed it was a drink, but then they saw Zhang Yi pull out a lighter and set something on fire. A hole appeared above them, and a ball of fire went flying out. As a defense measure, Zhang Yi had rigged up shooting holes in the front and back of his place, more than one. The bottle sailed through the air in a yellow arc and crashed to the ground right in front of them, under the shocked gazes of everyone. Smash! The sound was crisp, and then flames erupted. It was Zhang Yi's homemade Molotov cocktail. Even in freezing temps, gasoline burns hot and happy. The gas splashed everywhere and ignited. The balcony wasn't that big, so when the down jackets and cotton pants of a dozen or so people got doused in gas, they instantly went up in flames. Zhang Yi grinned, lit another Molotov cocktail, and tossed it out. Fire, fire. The dozen people were packed tight, and the balcony was isolated. Jumping to the next-door balcony wasn't easy. They were trapped, their bodies consumed by the flames. Zhang Yi watched them turn into screaming, writhing fireballs. Some tried to roll on the ground in the snow to put out the flames, but it barely made a dent. Gasoline keeps burning, even when it's wet. A few desperately tried to climb to the next balcony, but they slipped, lost their grip, and plummeted from the 24th floor. A long scream, then a sickening thud. From 24 stories up, he wondered if the snow below could soften the impact. Physics said no way. Even if he survived, every bone would be shattered, tendons torn, and internal organs ruined. He might as well be dead. Zhang Yi chuckled. At least falling to your death is quicker than burning. Boom! A grotesque face slammed against the glass, twisted in terror, staring at Zhang Yi. Help me! Please! Writhing in agony, he begged Zhang Yi for help. Zhang Yi raised his coffee cup in a mocking salute. I'll help you straight to hell, loser! The man let out a final scream and was swallowed by the flames. On the balcony next door, 60 or 70 people were waiting for their turn to take over. Witnessing this hellish scene, they went white as ghosts. Help! Someone, please! I don't want to die. The man engulfed in flames tried to crawl over, grabbing the railing with both hands, trying to pull himself across. One of the guys on the other side didn't hesitate. He kicked the man's hands as hard as he could. Get away from here. You're a goner, leave us alone. He kicked again and again, but the burning man wouldn't let go. He gritted his teeth, pulling with all his might. Finally, the guy kicked his fingers off. The burning man struggled for a moment, gave them a look of despair, and slowly fell in front of the fence. The stench of burning flesh hung in the air. All dozen of them died soon after. Some weren't badly burned at first and tried to escape, but the neighbors stopped them. They were too scared the flames would spread, so they let those guys burn. Some were so badly burned they jumped off the 24th floor. Human fat burns real nice. And the blaze actually provided some much-needed warmth, so everyone slowly shuffled forward, holding out their hands to warm themselves by the fire, faces impassive, afraid to be noticed. The fire burned for over 20 minutes before finally dying down. The neighbors stared at the charred corpses on the ground, fear creeping into their hearts. Trying to get to Zhang Yi, they'd already killed 30 or 40 people. There was no way to crack his place. How the hell were they supposed to steal his supplies? Sniff, sniff. A young guy who hadn't eaten in 2 days sniffed the air. The smell of burning fat was kind of appetizing. Like his favorite buffet barbecue from before, he couldn't help staring at the charred bodies. He swallowed hard. All around him, the sound of people swallowing echoed. The young man looked around in shock. On their gaunt, numb faces, he saw more than one person with a hungry look in their eyes. Too many people around, though. Their remaining moral code kept them from acting, but if they were alone, they'd probably dig in. Suddenly, a woman burst into tears. I can't take it anymore. They'd been at it all day, thinking they could easily break into Zhang Yi's place. but the result had left them in despair. So many dead, and Zhang Yi's walls and windows didn't even have a crack in them. She ran to the front of the crowd and threw herself at the glass, kneeling with a thump. "Zhang Yi, I'm starving to death. Please, help me. Just give me a scrap of bread." That she wasn't alone. One by one, people came over, kowtowing to Zhang Yi, sobbing, begging him for a bite to eat. It was a heartbreaking scene. Most of the people kowtowing were women, hoping to play on Zhang Yi's sympathy. Chapter 60 Bounty for Zhenghao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The endless cries for help from outside the window were relentless. People were kowtowing, banging their heads until they bled. They were a miserable sight. Zhang Yi sighed and walked to the window. "Hey, come on, guys. This is making me uncomfortable." That he lifted the steaming bowl of noodles in his hand. "When I'm stressed, I eat." Slurp. Zhang Yi devoured the noodles, making his neighbors' mouths water. You could practically see their envy. Hearing him, they cried even louder and kowtowed even harder. "Zhang Yi, we messed up. We just want to live. Just give us some food so we can survive. We'll do whatever you say from now on, okay?" Zhang Yi lowered his head and kept eating. Nothing beats a big bowl of noodles when you're starving. What a treat. After eating half the bowl, he casually placed the rest in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, right there, in front of his neighbors, separated only by glass. They could see it, but couldn't touch it. They were all pressed against the glass like dogs, as if they could somehow absorb the noodles through sheer force of will. "Don't say I never gave you a shot. Any one of you brings me Zhenghao's head, and I'll feed him for a week. He can eat all he wants." Zhang Yi felt zero sympathy for these people, but they were getting on his nerves, constantly smashing walls and cutting through windows, so, might as well let them kill each other. Now that would be entertaining. As he said this, Zhang Yi also sent the message to the building's group chat, alerting everyone. The neighbors pressed against the window froze, a hesitant look crossing their faces. Zhenghao had a gun. Taking him on meant risking their own lives, but if they couldn't handle Zhenghao, could they even touch Zhang Yi? There were dozens of corpses stacked outside Zhang Yi's place. They'd already learned the hard way that Zhang Yi was way more dangerous than Zhenghao. Meanwhile, Zhenghao was watching the scene unfold from his balcony next door. He didn't hear what Zhang Yi said, but he frowned, trying to figure out his next move. He'd lost 2 men this time. If he wanted to keep his grip on the building, he'd need to replenish his forces. As he was thinking, Zhenghao suddenly felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, raising the hairs on his skin. He whirled around, gun raised, only to see everyone staring at him with a strange look in their eyes. "What the hell do you want?" Seeing the gun, they flinched back, a little scared. "Get out of my way!" Zhenghao roared. They just kept staring at him with that odd, almost unnerving expression, like they weren't looking at a person, but at food. Zhenghao was horrified. He quickly retreated with his remaining men. "Wait, what about Zhang Yi's place?" Sun Jichao called out. Zhenghao cursed, "Damn it. We can't break through, so what are we supposed to do? We'll figure it out later." That he cursed again and stormed off. In front of Zhang Yi's window, both the kowtowing beggars and the window-smashing crew gave up against the freezing wind and snow, and gradually dispersed. Zhang Yi settled back into his warm home, ready to watch the show. After all, the building had just lost 40 people and almost all of them had participated in the attack on his home, causing massive damage. This made supplies even scarcer, and the resulting infighting was sure to be brutal. Soon, Zhang Yi started receiving more private messages. After this round, his neighbors had completely given in. Their limited strength was almost exhausted, and they could no longer launch a large-scale attack on Zhang Yi's home. What's more, facing Zhang Yi's family's battle readiness, they gave up. As a result, many people began to cry and beg Zhang Yi for pity, or offered to trade him things. Like Su Hao, the trust fund kid, he sent Zhang Yi pictures of his girlfriend, nude, and said, "Zhang Yi, you can have my girl. I just need some food, okay? She's a famous model in Tianhai City. Check out those headlights and tail fins, man. Just those legs alone will keep you busy for a year." Zhang Yi recognized the model. Su Hao had bought a place in the building just to keep her close. She always dressed to turn heads, flaunting herself like some kind of vixen. She never even glanced at the other guys around her. Towards Zhang Yi, she was nothing but contempt. But now, Su Hao was offering to sell her for a few meals. The woman was much thinner now, and seemed almost happy to be traded. At least she knew Zhang Yi had a lot of food, so she put some work into the pictures. What a skank! Zhang Yi thought. He had to admit, though, that she was stacked, definitely a luxury model. It would probably be a fun ride, but there was no way Zhang Yi would let such a shameless bitch in. She'd probably stab him in his sleep and take over his house. What kind of moral compass did a woman have if she was willing to sell herself for food? Zhang Yi watched her video 5 times with disdain, then closed the chat box in disgust. More conversations popped up. Fewer men were contacting him. They had nothing to trade. Only Uncle Yu was congratulating Zhang Yi for holding his ground. More women were reaching out. For example, Fang Yuqing said excitedly, "Zhang Yi, you're amazing. I knew you'd be okay. Qing'er can't get out now. They're keeping me locked up. But don't worry, I'll definitely find a way to come see you." Zhang Yi just scoffed and ignored her. Zhou Keer also sent a faint congratulation, but Zhang Yi knew that was just her personality. Darkness fell quickly, and now it was dark by 5 o'clock every day. With short days and long nights, the temperature would drop another 10 degrees at night. On TV, the few remaining stations were still broadcasting programs. With the strong support of officials, the snow disaster in our country has been effectively alleviated. Everything is moving in a stable and positive direction. According to statistics, the number of deaths due to the snow disaster in Tianhai City yesterday was 1. Zhang Yi found the news to be way funnier than stand-up. He was also curious about where the TV stations were broadcasting from, and how they were maintaining operations. While listening to the nonsense news, Zhang Yi scrolled through his chat history. He found it endlessly amusing to read his neighbors' messages, the ones where they were cursing, crying, or begging for mercy. The ones who were cursing were mostly the ones who had lost family members. When Zhang Yi was in a good mood, he'd offer his condolences. Congratulations to those who lost loved ones. You can have a barbecue and bury the ashes with rice. After all, more than a dozen people had been burned to death, so they were spared the trouble of cooking. Zhang Yi's teasing only made them curse him even more. But suddenly, he noticed something moving on the balcony. Curious, Zhang Yi went to the window. The snow reflected plenty of light outside. He saw people secretly moving the bodies, more specifically, the charred corpses. They were bundled up tightly and startled when they saw Zhang Yi looking at them. "Zhang Yi, we're not here to cause trouble, don't get the wrong idea. We're just here to move the bodies." Their voices trembled, and they avoided eye contact. Zhang Yi's lips curled into a smile. "Oh. Moving bodies, huh? Are you their family members? And if you want to bury them, just dump them. You're not going to dig graves, are you?" That they didn't know what to say. "Anyway, you don't need these bodies, so it's none of your business." They forced themselves to drag the bodies away. Zhang Yi waved through the glass. "Enjoy your meal." Chapter 61. Zhou Keer can't stand it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, Zhang Yi heard gunshots from the hallway. Bang! Bang! That it was Chen Zhenghao, no doubt. Zhang Yi's words seemed to have worked. When things get desperate, people's fear of death starts to fade, and Zhang Yi's promise of all-you-can-eat noodles for a week was a major temptation. Zhang Yi pulled up the surveillance feed. 2 men were on the floor, clutching wrenches and kitchen knives, blood staining the hallway. Chen Zhenghao wasn't in much better shape. He was leaning against the wall, gun in hand, looking spooked. They were ambushing people coming for water, giving others an opportunity to fight back. Chen Zhenghao ordered his guys to drag the bodies away and hurried back to his place, pistol clutched tight. It was his last resort. Once inside, Chen Zhenghao nodded to his brother, and they hauled the corpses into the kitchen. Soon, a ping, ping, ping sound came from inside. Chen Zhenghao's eyes were cold. Sitting on the couch didn't make him feel any better. He'd seen the news in the group. Zhang Yi had put a bounty on his head. It enraged him. He saw himself as the hunter, and Zhang Yi as the prey. Why should the prey fight back? He'd underestimated how crazy people could get when cornered. That morning, two desperate guys had come to kill him. It made Zhenghao uneasy, but it also drove him even wilder. Die. I'll kill you all. You want me dead? You're going down first, he roared. As he calmed down, a pain shot through his back. He called one of his guys over to take a look. The guy yelled, "Bro, you've been stabbed." A foot-long gash from a kitchen knife was visible on Zhenghao's down jacket. The blood wasn't obvious on the black fabric. The cold and his adrenaline rush had masked the pain. Hearing his brother's words, he suddenly cried out. "Those sons of bitches! Chop them to pieces." Sweat beaded on his forehead. He grabbed his cell and called Zhou Keer. "Dr. Zhou, I'm hit. Come patch me up." Soon, Zhou Keer arrived with her medical kit. Looking at the violent thug, she was disgusted, but to survive, she had to treat him. She'd patched up his arrow wound before. Even though she hated it, she had no choice when staring down the barrel of a gun. "This isn't free," Zhou Keer said coldly. Zhenghao chuckled, pointing toward the kitchen. "I'll give you a piece of the meat later." Zhou Keer sniffed, catching a strong, metallic smell. Her expression changed. She knew what that was. Fighting the urge to throw up, she said, "No, thanks." Zhenghao chuckled. "How long can you stay so picky, Doc? Sooner or later, you'll eat or you'll die." "I'd rather die." Zhou Keer frowned. "Can't have that. A doctor is too valuable these days." Zhenghao sighed. If Zhou Keer hadn't treated his leg, he'd be dead. "Don't worry, if I ever have to eat you, you'll be last." Zhenghao stared at her, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He'd been eyeing her for a while. He'd have made a move already if she wasn't so useful. Zhou Keer frowned and said nothing as she cleaned and bandaged his wound. When she was done, she grabbed her kit to leave. Zhenghao nodded to his guy, who blocked the door. Zhou Keer was shocked. "What are you doing?" Zhenghao said, "Nothing much. You're staying until I'm healed." He was scared. He knew plenty of people wanted him dead, and medicine was scarce. Having a doctor around made him feel better. Ignoring Zhou Keer's protests, he forced her to stay. Soon, his guy brought over a plate of cooked meat. Zhou Keer almost threw up when she saw what looked like fingers on the plate. She worked in a hospital. She'd been around dead people. Zhenghao offered her some, but she refused. He smirked and ignored her. He figured she'd change her tune when she got hungry enough. "We can't keep going like this. These guys are getting too bold. It's bad for us. We need to take out Zhang Yi and grab their place. That's the only way we'll be safe. Their place is like a fortress, and they've got supplies to last for months. Maybe the storm will be over by then. So, we need to figure out how to deal with Zhang Yi." Zhenghao told his guys. They looked at each other, shocked. "Bro, we've hit Zhang Yi's place a bunch of times, but we've never gotten in. It's locked up tight," Zhenghao said. "No place is perfect. Besides, he has to come out sometime. We'll move in next door and watch him. As soon as we get a shot, we'll take him out. Plus, it's safer up high." The others nodded in agreement. Following Zhenghao's lead, Zhou Keer overheard everything. She asked to use the bathroom, then sent a message to Zhang Yi, telling him what was up. Zhang Yi smiled. He wasn't going anywhere. "Got it. Stay there and keep an eye on things." Zhenghao wouldn't kill Zhou Keer because she was a doctor, so she was relatively safe. Zhang Yi wasn't in a rush. He'd set a bounty. Someone would take care of Zhenghao sooner or later. Zhenghao and his crew packed up their stuff and took Zhou Keer to the 24th floor. The young couple living next to Zhang Yi were terrified when they learned Zhenghao was moving in. Chapter 62 Live broadcast a feast for the neighbors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Open the door. Open the door. It's Zhenghao. I'm moving in. Open the door now, or I'll shoot. Inside, the young couple huddled together, terrified. What are we gonna do? They're gonna rob us. I bet they'll even take the last of our food. The wife looked at her husband. desperation in her eyes. He was a clerk, a guy with glasses. He held her close, trying to reassure her. "It's okay, honey. It's okay. If they want the house, we'll give it to them. Quick, hide the rest of the food on you." They stuffed the small amount of food they had left into their clothes and then, shaking, opened the door. Seeing Zhenghao and his crew standing there looking mean, the man swallowed hard, bowed, and said, "Brother Hao, the house is yours now. We'll leave." He turned to go, taking his wife with him. Before they could take 2 steps, one of Zhenghao's goons sneered and swung a pipe, *thwack, the man's vision went black, and he collapsed, even unconscious. Disbelief was etched on his face. He didn't understand why, after giving up everything, they'd attack him. The woman watched in horror as her husband fell, blood spreading across the ground, turning dark almost instantly. She clapped her hands over her mouth, trying to stifle a scream. Another blow landed on her head. 2 of Zhenghao's guys walked up and without a word, each hit her in the head with a pipe. Zhou Keer clamped her mouth shut. She was completely frozen. This was the first time she'd seen someone killed. No matter how tough you were, that was bound to shake you up. Zhenghao just glanced at them and sneered. "It's too damn cold out here. Gotta stock up on some extra grub, just in case." After killing so many people, he'd lost all respect for life, and there was something Zhenghao didn't want to admit, even to himself. Ever since Zhang Yi put a bounty on his head, he'd been scared. He needed to use even more brutal methods to keep the other residents in line, to make them submit through fear. Zhou Keer fought back the nausea and said nothing. Zhenghao strolled into the apartment like he owned the place, telling his guys to take care of the bodies. For the next few days, Zhang Yi could hear a constant clanging from next door. It was Zhenghao and his crew, searching his apartment for any weaknesses. They were also taking turns watching the front and back of Zhang Yi's place. Zhenghao figured Zhang Yi would eventually have to come out to throw out the trash or get some snow for water. All he needed was one opening to take Zhang Yi down and grab everything he had. But what he didn't know was that Zhang Yi had that huge pocket dimension, so water wasn't a problem at all. And sure, it was inconvenient for Zhang Yi to toss out the garbage, not with Zhenghao packing heat. He wasn't about to risk it, but for a homebody like Zhang Yi, letting the garbage pile up was no big deal. When he got bored, he played games or watched movies and TV shows he'd downloaded ahead of time. Meanwhile, out in the hallways, the pleas for help kept coming, and right alongside them, the curses, the angry shouts that he wouldn't share. "Zhang Yi, you're a heartless bastard. You could help people survive a little longer. Why are you so selfish? You're gonna end up alone for the rest of your life. Don't you have a heart? If you don't help us, you're gonna live with guilt and regret." Zhang Yi's response to the constant nagging was simple. He started live streaming his meals, showing off his comfortable life. "Hey, folks. Today, I'm making some braised pork belly for you." And with that, he slapped down a slab of pork belly that had to weigh at least 20 pounds. The neighbors in the group were seeing red. "Braised pork with that much pork belly? You're gonna waste it. If you can't eat it all, give it to me. Give it to me. Zhang Yi, you're not even human. You're an animal. You don't deserve that pork belly. Zhang Yi, I haven't tasted anything greasy in a week. Please, just let me have a piece of the skin. Give me a drop of the oil. You don't need that, right? Please, give it to me." People who were starving had no resistance to that kind of fatty food. Zhang Yi kept the camera running, and the neighbors could practically smell the braised pork through the screen. But after cooking for a bit, Zhang Yi frowned. He picked up a piece of the pork, tasted it, and then spat it out into the trash can. Too much soy sauce. This whole batch is ruined. Zhang Yi cooked pretty often, but he usually made simple dishes. The flavor of this pork dish was definitely off. How can anyone eat this garbage? Ugh, what a waste, such a waste. Zhang Yi shook his head and dumped the whole pot of pork into the trash. The group exploded. The neighbors went absolutely nuts. "Don't throw it away. Don't throw it away. My mouth is your trash can. I'm your trash can. What a sin. Why did you throw it away? Why? Why?" "Oh. I'm coming to pick up your garbage. Tell me where to go." "Master, I'm at your service. Do you need a dog? I'll help you take out the trash." Some people were so enraged by Zhang Yi's actions that they were ready to lose it right there and then, their hearts were breaking. It was freezing cold, and the gas had been shut off, so there was no way to cook anything. Even a single hot bite was a major luxury, forget braised pork. They couldn't even dream about it, and Zhang Yi just tossed the whole pot without a second thought. Damn him. I think I'll have something easier. Zhang Yi turned the camera, and suddenly a table with a dozen dishes appeared. The warm light made everything look even more delicious. Zhang Yi pointed to each dish, introducing them enthusiastically. Okay, tonight's dinner is braised prawns, braised sea cucumber with scallions, top-grade tofu, sweet and sour yellow river carp, 9-turn large intestine, pickled fish slices, sweet and sour pork kidneys, mullet egg soup, and shredded yams. Hey, fellas, dinner's served. Let's eat. Zhang Yi propped up his phone, just like some food blogger, picked up his chopsticks, and started to chow down. The neighbors in the group were losing their minds. Zhang Yi, give me a bite. I'll beg you. Zhang Yi, give my kid a bite of fish, even just the tail. Zhang Yi, you're my dad and I'm your son. Just let me have a sip of soup. A chorus of desperate pleas filled the air. Some people were calling Zhang Yi's phone, going nuts. Zhang Yi didn't pay any attention to them, just ate his food, enjoying every bite. Seeing those neighbors' angry faces made the meal taste even better.